everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Dream Big, Pray Hard, Never Quit interview series. Today, we have got with us my mother-in-law, Stephanie Craig. What a story she has. We are actually talking to her in Costa Rica. So, Dream Big, Pray Hard, Never Quit has gone international for the first time with her interview series. Yay! She's got a great story. They moved to Costa Rica because of an illness that she had. But I am not going to go into all that. I'm going to let her tell her story because it is an amazing one and it will bless so many people. So, good morning, Stephanie. How you doing?
I'm doing good, RJ. How about you?
Oh, just lovely. Getting ready for this wonderful school year and trying to figure out what we're going to do. But, you know, that's how we roll here with in education. But you're doing well. You look great.
Thank you.
And being there in Costa Rica has really, I know, helped you out tremendously. And we have been to visit you, and we absolutely love it there.
We loved having you here. We love it when our family comes to visit.
Oh, it was so nice. It was so nice. But I'm going to kind of let you tell your story. And I'm going to let you start wherever you want to start, end wherever you want to end. And then I will interrupt you throughout it just because that's what I'm good at.
I like when you do that too.
Okay, well, awesome. So I'm going to let you go. Go ahead.
All right. So I started to think about, where did this dream begin? And this dream didn't really begin with the illness. The illness came after the fact. So I have to go back to when I was a little girl. And when I was a little girl, sometimes I got into trouble with my mouth. That was my big thing that I'd get in trouble with.
I don't see that at all, Stephanie.
I know, I do. I understand that, RJ, because I'm like a quiet little wallflower most of the time. But
yeah,
just try to stretch your imagination. So I remember as a little girl, my dad used to threaten when I would get mouthy that he was going to send me to a convent because I came from a Catholic background. And at first it scared me. And then after a while, it didn't scare me anymore. I was like, well, that wouldn't be so bad. I wouldn't mind being a nun. So I know this sounds like a crazy thing, but that's where this story went back to for me. And I was like, so why? Why is that important? It was important because I always had a love of God. And if I take God out of this dream, then my dream is nothing. And nothing that I've gone through makes any sense. I would have given up. It wouldn't have meant anything. So that was really important. But I remember even as a little girl and even growing up that there was always a frustration with that. Because even though I loved God, he was always a faraway God to me. He wasn't close. I couldn't reach him. I loved him, but he was way far away. And then when I was 19 years old, someone told me how I could reach this God, how he could become a personal God to me. And he did. In the way of Jesus Christ, he became a personal God to me. And everything in my life changed. And that's when this dream started to take root. So that was in 1979. So fast forward now, that's when I married for the first time.
All right.
And also when I became pregnant for the first time. So now I'm going to fast forward to 1983. And in 1983, that's when the dream actually came into my heart and into my brain. And I was married, as I said, I'm going to back and forth here a little bit. I was married for the first time, all told, for 17 years to a singing evangelist. And he was in the military, and in 1983, we moved to the Philippines. And it was in the Philippines that I first recognized this dream or this calling to be a missionary. And that was because we were going out every weekend and we were singing and we were preaching. And I was feeling something in my heart that was drawing me to stay in another country. Although I didn't recognize it at the time, I didn't know what it was. Now I'm going to switch over to health. In 1990, so I'm going to go ahead for a while now. In 1990, at 31 years old, I was first diagnosed. Now I'm going to go back again. In 1979, when I first got pregnant, that's when I first started getting sick. So a lot's happened. I'm going back and forth in here. But when I first got pregnant, that's when I first got sick. In 1999 or 1990, that's when I was first diagnosed. So a lot's gone on between then and now. But through those years, my sickness became really normal to me.
Now, and if you don't want to say, let me know. But what was your sickness?
At the time, I had no idea.
Okay.
I just knew that I was very sick all the time and that I needed to just press on. I was a mom and something was wrong, but I just thought maybe everybody else was the same way. The typical sickness for me was that I would, can I say this on video? I would just barf all the time and digestive things all the time. I'd get very dehydrated. I'd go to the ER, they'd give me IVs and I'd go home. And I would do this like over and over and over and over. And I had a lot of doctors to just tell me that being a mom was a tiring job, just deal with it. So I did. I had some doctors tell me.
So doctors were like, hey, you're just suffering from being a mom.
You're a mom.
You're kidding me.
Oh, I'm not kidding you. And it gets worse. Several doctors told me that you're too young, too white, and too female to have anything seriously wrong with you. This is all in your head. And
now,
so,
do you think it was because of the technology that we didn't have? Or do you just think the doctors are just kind of like, you know what? She's just a mom. She's going through something, and we just kind of tell her to, hey, stay strong, buck up, and keep going.
to be fair, RJ, I think it was a little bit of both. And I think it was me as well, because I'm kind of a type A personality. So I was one to keep pushing.
Right.
And I was and still am, a very obedient person. So if somebody in authority tells me to do something, I'm going to do my best to do that. So when they told me these things, I seriously, in my brain, thought every other mom feels the same way, does the same thing, and I'm just the big baby that cries about it. So I would, until I was in dire straits and couldn't stand up anymore, I would just press on until I couldn't anymore. And also, what I'm going to tell you what my diagnosis was, when I tell you what my diagnosis was, they would never have guessed it in a million years. So it was so out of the ordinary, there was no way they were going to figure it out except that God intervened.
Right.
So it was a little bit of everything. I can't blame it all on them either. But to say, it's that you're too white, too young, and too female to have anything seriously wrong with you. Come on, you could have tried a little harder.
Right.
So that was all of it. But in 1990, when I was finally diagnosed, it was the same old symptoms again. But this time, and I believe this was God, I think he allowed something different to happen. And this time, something different did happen. In addition to these same old symptoms, this time, the palms of my hands and the soles of my feet had turned bright red, like they had been burned, like I put them on a stove and they had been burned. And the skin just started peeling off of them, kind of like a snake. And I'm like, well, this is bizarre. So I went in to see the doctor again. They sent me to a dermatologist, and the dermatologist is like, I've never seen anything like that before. And so he started running a bunch of tests. And when I got back in to see him, my body was in bad shape. I remember that my heart rate was staying at 180 beats per minute, and it wouldn't come back down. And he went out of the room. He called an oncologist and sent me right over to see him. So I went over to see this oncologist, and I didn't know. I was 30 years old, but I didn't know what an oncologist was. I knew he was a doctor. And he was the first doctor in all these years to take a full medical history on me from start to finish. And it had been 11 years by then. And so this doctor said that he remembered reading about something in medical school. And if that's what it was, it would put all my years of symptoms together. And so he did a blood test and he found it. He sent me in for a CAT scan and an ultrasound to confirm it. And he found an 1.5-inch tumor in my pancreas. And so I was young and naive, and I believed everything, and I said, fix it. So within a week, I was in, and I had surgery, and they removed they removed 2/3 of my pancreas and my spleen. And the type of cancer that I had was called a glucagonoma. And a glucagonoma is a really, really rare cancer. And what it does is it secretes massive amounts of the hormone glucagon into your bloodstream. They're tumors that produce massive amounts of glucagon. And glucagon is the counter regulator of insulin. So basically, your symptoms would be very much the same of having massive amounts of insulin in your body every time these tumors secrete. So I had over the years, and this is one reason they couldn't find it, it did not do it all the time. It would be like you as a diabetic, when you are going into, if you've eaten way too much and your insulin will spike.
Right.
And say, like, I had gone into the emergency room on several occasions and my insulin was over 500. And they would put me in the room, they'd call in an endocrinologist, get ready to start me on insulin.
Right.
And then by the time that the endocrinologist came in, they would check my sugar again and it would be back down to normal. And they'd attribute it to a mistake. So that's what my body was doing continually, up and down, up and down, up and down.
Which
and so
is killing your insides. Literally, yeah, it's literally almost like rotting
absolutely
the inside of you, because that's what it does.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, when they took out my pancreas, the 2/3 of my pancreas, I had no end to the pancreas. It was just there was no end of the pancreas. So it's no wonder they couldn't find it. It wasn't all them.
Right, right.
So anyway, everything came back to normal. And they told me that I probably would not ever hear from this cancer again. It was done. But every 6 months, I still had to go back in for checkups and everything.
Right.
And in 1992, the cancer returned. So at that time, they gave me a prognosis of less than 5 years. And in 1994, the symptoms were getting so bad again that they removed all but 5% of my pancreas and my spleen again, because my spleen had grown back. And 1994 wasn't only hard because of the cancer, that was hard enough. But my family at the time lived in North Carolina by you guys.
Right.
And my ex-husband was on a remote tour with the Air Force to Korea. And for the surgery, the Red Cross had to bring him back home from Korea. And I found out that he was having an affair in Korea and he planned on leaving me. And after the surgery, he did that. So it was a really hard year for me. And I don't typically have problems with my personality, with unforgiveness and bitterness. That's just not part of my makeup. But I was really having a problem with this, with him and with the situation. I was very sick and it just was a bad situation. So my best friend, her name is Cookie Chavis.
Right.
She walked through this whole thing with me, and we had prayed and we had fasted and we had cried and we had talked, and I just wasn't getting anywhere. I just couldn't move past this. And one day she said to me that she had a friend who she thought might be able to help. I didn't know if this friend was a man or a woman. I did not care. I just knew that I needed help. I was not getting anywhere. And that's how I met John Craig, my husband, your father-in-law. You want to know how we met?
Yeah, tell us how you met. I think I remember, but you go ahead.
So Cookie told me about, now I know that he's a man. I didn't care. When I get on a mission, I am a girl on a mission. So I found out what church he went to. I remember going to that church on a Sunday night, because I had my own church, on a Sunday night, and they didn't have church that night. So I went, or on a Wednesday night, they didn't have church that night. So I went on a Sunday night, and I went into the church, and I saw somebody that I knew, thank goodness, and I said, "Who is this John Craig?" And she pointed him out. So I walked up to John.
Well, you can't miss him. He's like 8 foot tall.
He is. He's about 8 foot tall, and I'm really not. So I remember going up to him, and John at the time, he wasn't, I mean, now he's really like outgoing and stuff, but at
Right.
the time he just really wasn't. And I remember going up to him, and I remember sticking out my hand and saying, "My name is Stephanie Weber, and you have a message from God for me." And he kind of shook my hand and he said, "I do." And I'm like, yeah, you do.
I'm
And
laughing because I can see him doing that right now.
yes, he did. And so just then the service started, and that was the end of it. But that's how I met John. So that night he came over to my house, and we sat down, and I told him the story from start to finish. It probably took an hour. I'm just crying, the ugly tears, the big nose, the snot, the whole thing. And he's just sitting like a deer in headlights. Like, oh my gosh, what is going on here? And he never said a word. He was probably scared. He never said a word. And then finally, I told him about the bitterness and the unforgiveness and everything. And at the end of it, he said nothing. And I just sat there like, are you really not going to say anything? And he thought for a minute, and that's John, isn't it?
Oh,
Like,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
He thinks, he doesn't say anything, he thinks. And then he said, I don't think it's bitterness and unforgiveness that you're dealing with. And I'm like, I don't have the energy to go through all that again. What did you miss? And he said, it's not. He said, it's fear. And he said, I want you to know that there is nothing in this world and no one in this world that God is not bigger than them or that. And God has got you. And I'll tell you, RJ, I can hardly, we've been married almost 25 years now. And
Right.
every time it still moves me today. And that night, my heart started to heal. And I knew I could love this man, but it was not long till I did love this man.
Right. Right.
Nearly a year later, we were married.
Well, I want to stop right there and talk about the fear thing because on Dream Big, Pray Hard, Never Quit, that is such a big thing. People have a very difficult time moving past fear. And that's what holds people back on so many things. And I'm just going to use this week analogy on Marjorie and I this weekend, going on this balloon ride. We were both scared to death, but I knew that if we went on this, it was going to be something great.
Yeah.
Something we would never forget, and something we were always going to talk about the rest of our life. And that's exactly what it was. You had to step out of the fear, go into faith, trusting God that everything's going to be okay. And then this experience that you can't even describe happens. And that is, that's what achieving your dream is like. It's something that is, you're scared, but you got to have faith, and you got to take that leap of faith. And then when you do it and God sees that you're willing to have faith in him, unbelievable things happen in your life. Yeah. And you can attest to that because you've known me 20 something years, and you've seen where Marjorie and I have started to where we're at and what we're doing. And I don't mean to make that about us by any means, but I just wanted to point out that you've got to get over the fear.
You have to.
And that is so hard.
You don't have to. You don't have to, RJ. You have a choice.
Exactly.
You have a choice. You can stay exactly where you are in that fear and never move, be paralyzed in the fear. But where's that going to get you?
Nowhere.
You've got to move past it.
Yep.
You've got to move past it. But before you move past it, you've got to identify it. I didn't even realize it was fear.
Right.
The reason that I couldn't get past it is because I was bucking up against the wrong wall.
Right.
Thank God somebody could come along and see more clearly than I could. We're not supposed to do this by ourselves.
No,
Thank God.
exactly.
Thank God he sends people around us that can see more clearly than we can.
And that's what he does. You always find, there's been times in my life, and I'm sure like yours, that key people come along in your life.
Yes.
And you have, you know there's something there. You don't know what it is,
Yes.
but you kind of latch onto them because
Yeah.
you know you're supposed to get something from them.
Yes.
And they might not stay. I mean, you might not marry them like you did.
For sure.
I mean, but I have a lot of people in my life that I was like, okay, I'm supposed to get something from this individual.
Yes.
And when you get it, you guys move on and go your separate ways. It was for a time. It was for a time. In your case, it was for a lifetime.
Yeah. I'm so glad. I kind of like him, you know?
Yeah, he's an okay guy.
I love that. So anyway, we've been married 25 years now. We'll be celebrating our 25th this year. And there's been so many good things, such a blessing. But in those 25 years, John has seen more than any man should ever have to see his wife go through. You know, that's just the bad with the good. But for me, he has been, well, for him, he's chosen to be my nurse, as well as my husband. He is my advisor. He's my shoulder to cry on, my soft place to fall. He's my best friend. He's my confidant. He's a man of his word. That is absolutely for sure. He could have left any time and he chose to stay. But by 2008, my health was declining again.
Right.
And I was weak. I was on a morphine pump for pain. And by March 2008, I had complications from the cancer that had nearly killed me once again. And we had the talk again, you know, what are you going to do when this happens? Because I was ready to go, you know.
I remember all this. I mean, I probably don't.
Well, you were part of it.
Yeah, I don't, you know, I didn't get into the ins and outs of it. But I remember you going through all this, and I remember how hard it was.
It was very hard. It was very hard. So together we decided that because it could be any time.
Right.
My health was showing it could be any time. So together we decided to pay off all of our debt so that John could take an early retirement when he retired in 20 months from that time. And this was before Dream Big, Pray Hard, Never Quit, but I guess you guys are really related because this is what John asked me. He said, what dream have you had that you've never fulfilled? And I was like, babe, I'm good. I've lived a wonderful life. I've had family that I dearly love, and I know where I'm going. I'm satisfied. I'm ready to go. I'm happy. There's nothing lacking that I'm ready. And he's like, no, there's got to be something that you've never done that you've always wanted to do. And I'm like, babe, the only thing that I can even remotely think about is I never went on a cruise, but you know, I'm good. And he's like, we're going on a cruise. And I'm like, no, we're not. I was sick and I didn't want to go. So he said, we're going. And he scheduled a cruise, an 8-day cruise. I remember being absolutely terrified. I was too sick to go on a cruise. Do you remember that, RJ?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do.
I'm like, you know, I'm ready to go, but to go because you did something stupid, that's not a good idea. But we had, really, I remember thinking this. We had so many people praying for us that I just wouldn't die on the cruise. And I remember trying to keep my mouth lined up, not to speak horrible things like, please pray I don't die, not saying that, but that's really what was going on in my brain. But we did go on the cruise, and going on the cruise was a miracle in itself because I had been at that point a virtual shut-in for like a year and a half at that point.
Yeah.
And except for going to church once a week, going to the doctor, going to the hospital, I did not leave my house. I couldn't. I was too sick. Even going to the mailbox I couldn't even go to my mailbox, which was right outside my house, without resting. It was a hard trip. But on this miracle cruise, and it was a miracle cruise, something physically began happening in my body. I don't know if it was faith. I don't know if it was God's timing. I don't know if it was obedience, like you had talked about before, obedience to doing what God said to do when he said to do it. I don't know what it was, but the only physical thing, other than it just being a miracle, the only physical thing that we can still to this day put our finger on is that I was totally deficient in vitamin D. And we went and spent 8 days basking in God's natural sunshine, pure vitamin D. And I believe that God's timing and the sunshine, and I believe this, I can't prove this, I don't know, but I believe that somehow that sunshine somehow rebooted my body. I hadn't seen sunshine in a year and a half. So I had forgotten about this, but when you asked me to share my testimony, I went and I found some old notes.
Right.
And in those notes, this is what it said. I had made these notes, by the way, the summer following the cruise. So right after the cruise. Since the cruise, I have gradually been able to exercise on a regular basis, decrease my pain medication by more than a third, most of the time, as long as I'm really careful with my energy, except for the knowledge that I take 13 to 16 shots a day and 24 pills each day, I wouldn't even know that I'm sick. So I was doing, after the cruise, I was doing much, much better, but I was feeling better, but I was still very sick. So summer was there and it was good, but winter was coming. So out of nowhere, in May of 2009, I remember the day, I remember what happened. I was not praying. I had already prayed that day. I was in the bathroom putting on my makeup because that's something that I always did, even when I was at my sickest, because it makes me feel better. I remember I was putting on my makeup and I was just thinking. I wasn't sad. I was just thinking. And I thought, I don't have another winter in me. And I know this is going to sound weird, but I heard God. Not like I heard God like when you're reading his word and you hear him. Not like I heard God in my heart. I heard God.
You know, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I know exactly what you're talking about, because when Rihanna was going through her stuff and I was breaking down, the same thing happened.
He does.
And it just, and I went, and that changed my life. Right then, I was like, oh my God. And so I know exactly what you're talking, and it does. Like
you just gave me goosebumps.
It changes you forever.
Forever. And he doesn't do it often, but he did it that day.
Right.
And I heard him say, you're right, you don't. And I kind of looked around because I was the only one there. And I knew it was him. And I just very calmly, I said, does that mean you're taking me home? And he said, no. And now I'm totally confused, because what are the other options? And then as it kind of settled in me, I'm like, well, the only other thing he could mean is that I'm going somewhere, like physically going somewhere. And then I started in my flesh. I'm like, oh, no, I'm not. And I'm like, well, I'm not going. Where would I go? I'm not going like where it's warm all the time. I'm not. And then I'm like, who can afford to go to Miami? I'm like, no. And total silence, RJ, not another word. The conversation's over. So I'm just sitting there in my thoughts. I don't know. So I finally got done and I went and I sat down on the couch and I had my computer with me, and the Lord started speaking to me. And he said to put into the search engine, he said to put in climate, cost of living, quality of life, and infrastructure. I didn't even know what infrastructure meant. I still am not sure what infrastructure meant. And when I did, Costa Rica and Panama and I think Belize, I don't remember all of them that came up. Right. But he would just tell me more and more to put in. And as I put in, Costa Rica kept coming to the top, kept coming to the top. And he said, that's where you're going. I was just dumbfounded. I didn't know what to do with this. So John came home from work and I didn't know, how am I going to tell him what's been going on? Because this is craziness. So I told John about it eventually. And John, you know, but people that don't know John wouldn't know this. So John is usually, he knows how to handle me because I'm a little bit of a spitfire. And John doesn't just come out and say, no. He will say, let's think about this. Let's reason about this. And then he'll tell me no. So after I told him, he's like, what is wrong with you? Do you know how sick you are? Absolutely not. This is not going to happen. And so I sat and I listened to everything he had to say. And I said, babe, I can't tell you. All I can say is that this is what God said to me. I said, would you just pray about it? He was quiet. He said, I'll pray about it, but I don't know what you're thinking. Do you know how sick you are? Absolutely not. I think somewhere, as well as the common sense in him, I think somewhere in him, he also remembered that and knew that God had called me to be a missionary way back when. I was too sick to do it.
Right.
But there was something in John that said, I am not going to a third world nation and living in a hut somewhere, regardless of what God says. And she would do it. So a couple days went by and I asked John, I said, babe, have you prayed about it? And he's like, yes. And I said, so what did God say? He said, listen to what you have to say. So we sat down and I showed him and he's like, we need to check this out. We came to Costa Rica. We did a retirement seminar. I did okay through it. We found the home that we believed that God was showing us that maybe that's where we would live. We came home. We sold our home. We sold our car. And we moved on Thanksgiving Day, 2009, the day that John retired. We moved with 8 suitcases in hand. And that was it. That was the beginning of our life over here. We were so excited, but we were a little bit afraid. I was afraid that this was not John's dream, that he was doing this for me. And I asked him, baby, are you sure that you've heard from God? And he said, I have. If this move makes you happy, is that Thor?
That is. Yeah,
Hey, Thor!
I think Veronica just came home. That's Thor's favorite person.
I love Thor and I love Veronica. He said, I have. If this move makes you feel better and happy and keeps you here a little bit longer, that's where I want to be. I'll be happy wherever you are. So I have got to say that this was the purest example of Christ's love that I have ever seen. And Ephesians 5:25 says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loves the church and gave himself up for her. RJ, I'll tell you what. That man is something. We would live in Costa Rica until the Lord took me home, and we didn't expect that to be very long. And after that, I just assumed that John would go back and live in the States like he had before. So I didn't get worse, and I didn't get better. I just stayed the same until 2013. And that year, I got progressively worse. I had stayed in contact with my oncologist at Duke throughout this whole process. And in 2013, as I was getting worse and worse, my oncologist said, get home now. So by the time I got home, on top of the cancer, I had a collapsed lung. I had blood clots through both of my lungs. I had 3 types of sepsis. And throughout this process, I had never stopped believing that God could heal me, never one time. But I had stopped believing that he was going to heal me.
Right.
I just thought that was not his plan. So now in 2013, as I'm lying as close to death as I ever have, it was God's time. I didn't know it at that time, but it was his time. And from head to toe, over the next 30 days, he absolutely healed me. My glucagon levels came back down to normal for the first time in all of these years, being off of my medicine. It was a crazy way that I ended up off of my medicine. It was actually an accident that happened, but God doesn't have accidents.
Right.
He allowed it to happen. So my glucagon levels all came back down to normal. When they came back down to normal, I was on insulin, And my sugar levels started to go crazy because now we were trying to balance the insulin
Right.
or the sugar levels. Now the glucagon is healed. So now the insulin is doing its own thing. So my endocrinologist ended up lowering the insulin levels until now I'm just on the oral medicines. And that's too much. She took me off of all of that too. So now my sugar levels are completely normal. I had terrible high blood pressure. That all came back down to normal. He healed me top to bottom. That was 7 years ago. It's now 7 years later, and I am walking in absolute health. I had never lived a day as a healthy adult from the ages 19 to 55. That's 36 years. I'm so thankful and blessed to be able to serve him every single day. He's blessed John and I with a life in paradise, but we don't take that for granted. He's blessed us with the privilege of serving our local church in our community. And we host a Bible study in our home every week with 15 to 25 people typically. We serve a meal in our home, and our goal is to foster family over here because we're all expats away from home. We have no
Right.
family here, so that's our goal over here. John is an elder in our church, and he leads the usher ministry, and I lead the greeter and kitchen ministries. We love to serve whenever there's an opportunity. Still, there's a huge price to pay, RJ, and the cost is our family in the States. So with the good, there's always bad. We don't talk about that an awful lot because that's the real painful part. We sure didn't know when we started down this path where it would lead. We thought that I would die soon and that John would come home. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
You know, that is painful, but I also want you to look at the joy that you and John have been able to give to family members from you living down there. I mean, I would have never gone to Costa Rica, ever. And it's one of the best times I ever had.
Thank
So,
you.
I mean, you guys moving was tough. It was really tough on Marjorie. Um, but everything worked out, and the joy that you guys have been able to bring the family from you leaving and allowing so many people to come visit you. I mean, it's stuff I'll never forget.
I love you, RJ.
I'm editing this out now. So, I mean, you guys have done amazing things since you've been there. And you've been an answer to a lot of prayers. Um, and think of all the people you've helped, not just your family, but the people that have moved there like you have and didn't know where to go. So, I mean, you've done tremendous things and a total dream for Marjorie and I to go visit and a dream for what you guys have accomplished. Now I kind of want people to know what you do. You've told us all about the ministry and the stuff you do, and that is cool. That is cool. But what you guys do on the side, because John has got what, 2 retirements, is that correct? So he's retired from the
Mm-hmm.
military. He's
One and a
retired,
half.
and
One and a half.
1.5, yes. And and that's why you guys moved that. You were able to move down there with that, but you guys supplemented your income. And to me, this is a crazy story. I sat there and I tell the story to my friends. I'm like, wow, what you just kind of fell into it. And I was like, why can't I fall into something like that?
It was
But
amazing.
yeah, go ahead and tell that part of it. I think that's great.
So when we came over here, in the short time we had, we did homework to see could our finances, handle over here, and they could. But you have to remember that was 2019, and as the U.S. goes, so goes Costa Rica, just a little bit later. So right after we moved down here, the economy also crashed down here.
Right. And that was 2000. You said 2019. That was
Oh, I'm
2008,
sorry, 2009.
2009. Right.
2009. 2009. So our finances didn't go as far as we thought they were going to go.
Right.
And so when we got down here, we could have done it, but it was not going to be as comfortable as we thought it was going to be. So we got down here, and immediately, like within several months of being down here, people that were around us, it started where we lived, but people around us in our little community identified us as being people. And they saw us and they were like, you're here full time. We're only here. They were locals.
Right.
And they said, we only come down on weekends. Have you ever thought about being property managers? You could just kind of start managing our condo and renting it out. And we're like, we've never done anything like that before. And they're like, give it a try. I think you can do it. So we started out just managing on Airbnb, which everybody knows, just managing their condo. Well, the other people around us started seeing what we were doing and that we were being successful with it. And they're like, would you do that for us too? Well, we ended up managing 6 in the little complex we were in, managing 6 little condos. Well, we learned the good and the bad with that one.
Right.
But then we had met some friends of ours at church, and they are owners of a very big corporation in the States. And they just watched us, and they've become our best friends over here.
Now,
And
I will say, just to reiterate, I know who you're talking about. I won't say, but a very big corporation in the United States.
Yes. And they are our best friends at church. And they just watched us learn and make mistakes as we're learning a new business. And they own 2 penthouses on the beach. And one day, and now remember, I'm very sick as we are starting this business.
Right.
This is before the Lord healed me. And they watched us learn. And they would give us some pointers as we went every now and then, but being very respectful of it. And then along the way, they said, hey, John and Stephanie, what do you think about coming and managing for us? This was only like a year maybe into the process. And I remember just thinking, I can't do another thing. I am exhausted. I'm sick. And I remember the woman saying to me, she said, isn't it better to work smarter, not harder? And I'm still thinking, I can't do another thing. And she said, let's think about this. Wouldn't it be smarter to manage 2 penthouses oceanfront than to be working 6 condos that are not near the ocean? How much of a difference do you think you can make in your commissions with that kind of traffic and the difference in prices of the condo? I'm like, yes, it makes a lot of sense, but I don't have the energy. And such wisdom. And she said, what do you think about, did you put contracts with these people? And I'm like, yeah, we were smart enough to put contracts. She said, I remember correctly, you went into those contracts about a year ago and they should be running out. She was so much more wise than I am. I don't even know why we thought about putting contracts on them. She said, they should be running out about now. And I went and I looked, and for sure they're running out one by one, like within the next month and a half. So we ended up switching and just working for them for several years. Now we're working for several more. And
right.
An absolute blessing, RJ. And it is such fun. We get to meet the best people. Of course, COVID is changing all that right now. I don't know what the future holds. But this has it's been extra income. And you know what the best part is? Probably 80% of the people that come down here, one of the first questions they ask is, what brought you to Costa Rica? And I get to share this testimony with them.
See, now if you were staying in the States, you would not be able to share it as much.
That's true.
So you're going to tell your testimony over and over and over again.
Over and over and over again. And they go home and they share my testimony, and they'll write me and they'll say, even the non-Christians, they'll be like, I had to go home and tell your story to such and such. By the way, they're coming to see you. To make sure you tell them that story too. So it has been very cool.
Yeah, what a wonderful story. And I loved Costa Rica. I mean, and I'll put a plug in. What's the name of your company?
Kingdom Condos.
Kingdom Condos. And guys, if you have never been to Costa Rica, it is beautiful. I never thought because look at me, I'm a big dude. I do not like heat. And that was, and you know, that was my big thing. I was like, yeah, I'm sure it's
I
beautiful, but I'm going
remember.
to sweat to death and it's going to be miserable there. And it's not. I had so much fun doing all the things we did. And if you ever get a chance to go to Costa Rica, it's absolutely
Email me.
beautiful. Yeah, email it. And I'll put all that stuff up here as well. Now, this is not about plugging your business, but
Of
hey, if we
course
can
not.
plug it, we'll plug it.
Thank you.
Um, but thank you so much for being on Dream Big, Pray Hard,
Thank you,
Never Quit.
RJ.
You're
RJ, can I say one more thing?
you can say whatever you want.
I am so proud of you. I'm so proud of your family. I'm so proud of you. God bless you in this ministry. I just love seeing you walking in your calling. And I am so thankful that you're my son. God bless you.
Thank you. I truly appreciate that. Now I gotta do my exit, so give me a minute. Um, so thank you very much for being on Dream Big, Pray Hard, Never Quit. And what an inspirational story you have, and
Thank you,
it's
RJ.
going to be shared with hopefully hundreds, if not thousands. And we greatly appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Love you,
And
RJ.
love you. Now, don't get off. Hey, everybody. Again, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Dream Big, Pray Hard, Never Quit video series. And remember to always dream big, pray hard, never quit.